It is my pleasure to be presenting to you all here about the work that we have been doing in social media analytics in transit management. This work has been done in collaboration with my colleague, Professor Amir Shalabi. So I'll go with just a summary of what I'm about to say. The fundamental point that I'm trying to say and work on with here is that the data is a new asset. You cannot not have a policy for data analytics, and you cannot have a successful company and operation of transit systems without having it. So it's just like putting your best employee without the right tools. During the great ones times, the tools that were needed is just like a hockey stick. But right now, you really cannot play hockey without the analytics. And there are a couple software systems and stories about how to track the shooting areas and the shooting potential and probabilities that coaches use right now. So before also I start, I would like to thank our collaborators. First, a huge respect and thanks to Calgary Transit, who was quite proactive and visionary in supporting this project. Qtrick, SB North America, which is a consulting firm here in Ontario, and of course, INSERC, the national funding body in Canada. I'll be talking about two main topics. The first is the tools. I'll show some analysis of the social network, which is basically related to who is talking to who. The semantic analysis, what are the topics that they are talking about? And then the sentiment analysis, what are their opinions about these topics? The areas of discussion of implementation of all these tools will relate to customer satisfaction, which is the main area that we have worked on. Also engaging citizens in construction work and project planning, in the operation management of the transit agency, and also the transit planning. So let me start by talking about the work that we did in service analysis and customer satisfaction. Here is a summary of our methodology that we did. We went to social media. In our case, it was Twitter. However, the same methodology is applicable to other social media outlets. And the first thing that we did is that we captured the network of people and tweets. We conducted a social network analysis, and with that, managed to understand the communities that exist in this network, and also identify the influential players in the network. On the other side, we used a system to label every tweet based on the topic that they talking about, and for that we used a small lexicon that we created. Once you have these two together, you now have like an ability to conduct a socio-semantic analysis, which tells you which part of the network is thinking about which ideas. We then added a sentiment analysis to that, which basically puts every tweet and labels every tweet to be talking in a positive or a negative sentiment. If you add these two together, the ideas that people are talking about and their sentiment about it, it could be your first start in capturing the opinion of people. If you capture this over time, you can see, more importantly, the dynamics of opinion, what makes people change their points of view. So we looked at 3 agencies, and this was a couple years ago when we downloaded the data. We looked at TTC, Go Transit, and TransLink. The nodes in the network are shown here. For example, in TTC, we had 160,000 nodes, and in Go Transit 44, and in TransLink 82. The network of the top followers, we call them the 100 followers. These are the influential players in the network, which is basically people or agencies or entities that has 100 followers or more. There were 3,000 of these in TTC, 1,400 in Go Transit, and 4,100 in TransLink. And the spaghetti diagrams that you see on the right of the screen right now is this network. Every dot that you see is a person in the network. The top network is TTC, the middle one is the Go Transit, and the last one is TransLink. As I was saying, every dot that you see there is a person, and every link is a followship. So somebody is following another person. And the beauty of the advancement of social networks, thanks to Facebook and other big companies, is that with a very simple algorithm, you can divide this network based on the density of the connection. And as you can see, with a very simple algorithm, we managed to find that there are 3 different densities in the TTC network, about 4 in the Go Transit, and kind of 2 in the TransLink. And these are people who are connected to each other more than they are connected to the overall network. And for that, you can designate them to be kind of a small sub-community. And I'll discuss this later on. The first task that we did is that we looked at the frequency of tweets. What you see here is the tweets for the month of February. What you have here also is 28 diagrams or broken lines. Each one of these is a day. It starts at second 0 all the way till midnight. So the every line that you see here is the number of tweets tweeted by the second in a single day. And so again, from the left is the start of the day, and the end is the 24 hours of that day. And this is only month of February, so what you have here is 28 of these broken lines or curves. And as you can see, there is a couple of obvious things. There is an area of common frequency, regular frequency, typical frequency. And there is areas of huge spikes, and there is areas in the middle, or I would say days in the middle. It's obvious that there is something going on in the days where the frequencies are different. We went back for the month and looked at the news articles and found that in some of these days, especially with the big spikes, there was an incident. Like, for example, in one case in TTC, there was a fire. In one case, when we looked at the data from TransLink, there was an earthquake. And the service was interrupted significantly. But some of the spikes that you see there, when we went back and tracked these days, we couldn't find a major incident. And we looked into why the Twitter activity spiked there. And the only thing that we could find was that there is an issue that's capturing the attention of customers. So sometimes there was a discussion about the extension of the service, the change of the price, the ticket price, a variety of decisions that were made in city council or something like that. And so basically from this, we ended up recognizing 3 types of days: a regular day, a day with incident, and a day with an issue. Now, the semantic analysis allows us to label every tweet based on the topics that they have. And so we have algorithms that can go to every tweet and detect the words that exist in that tweet. And so we built a small lexicon of what would define customer satisfaction based on the best practices from the TRB and others. And as you can see on the left, we defined 8 categories that could be used to measure satisfaction. The first is spatial availability. If there is a bus station that is nearby where I live or where I want to go. Temporal availability, does it come in the right time for me, or is it just like only a rush hour bus? Information availability, do I have information easily available to tell me how to take this bus and when to ride it? Capacity availability, is it crowded or not? Travel time, is there is an real-time information about the actual arrival of the bus? Service delivery, I guess that's the quality of the facilities. Safety and security, and then maintenance, is it like well maintained or not? So these 8 categories are our suggested model of what customer satisfaction should be. Of course, everybody can change this. To the right, for every category, you see a set of words. And every time the algorithm finds one of these words in a tweet, the tweet is labeled as talking about this topic. Hence, you could find that a tweet is talking about 2 or more topics that's allowed in this algorithm. So again, the first thing that we did is that we looked at the people. Second, we went to each and every tweet and labeled it. Is it talking about safety? Is it talking about information, capacity, and so forth? And then this allowed us to look at the distribution of the topics. In this chart, you see on the horizontal axis the 8 categories that we defined for customer satisfaction. The vertical axis is the percentage of tweets talking about one of these topics. The bars in every category cover, in red, normal days, days with average frequencies. And the other bars cover 4 days where there was disruption of the service. And so here you see a set of parameters being analyzed. It seems from what you can see here is that the spatial and temporal availability were not that significant in the number. And the explanation for this is not clear, but there is one option, which is basically, if you are on Twitter, you're already a captive rider, so there is no big discussions about if the bus is available to you or not. But if you move to the other elements, you see now there is a significant information that can be learned from this. Remember, the red bar is the average normal day. And one major observation that you can see here is that information availability is becoming a significant issue for people. There's like about 17 to 18% of the tweets are about it every day, which kind of suggests to transit agencies, this is one of the cheapest things that you can do, which is invest in a team and a system to provide information on time and in a reliable way. And there's also another surprise in this bar, on this set of bars, is that you see that typically people are talking to the tune of 17, 18%, but in 3 of the days of disruption, they were not talking too much about information being available or not, which is quite surprising, because this means that on these 3 days, most probably TTC was very effective in their information delivery. And this is clear from looking at the final bar in blue. There was a lot of talk about it in that day, which could yield a result that TTC was not doing a good job in this regard. I'll jump into the travel time and also look at the comparison between the days. In red, you see the average travel time is by far one of the most important topics. In the days of disruptions, in 2 days, the interest in it went higher, and obviously people were not informed about it. They were concerned about it. And we also found that these 2 incidents happened at the rush hour. And so people were like caught by surprise, and there was a limited time for them to search for alternatives. The other 2 days were less concerning to people, and we found also that there was good communication in one, but in the other, the incident happened in the late morning, so people had enough time to find their way back home. If I look at the social and the semantic dimensions, we again look here at the 8 dimensions of the topics, and in the vertical, the percentage of tweets. And the blue bar in each of these is the 100 followers tweets. So these are the frequency of tweets by the influential players in every network. These are players who have 100 followers or more. The other bars represent the communities. If you remember, the TTC community had, TTC network had 3 sub-communities. We labeled them here as 0, 1, and 2. And you can see in general, across all these categories, that the 100 followers are on the average in terms of their frequency, which tells you that these people have the pulse of the community. And these people are people who can be representative of the opinions of this community. And of course, in an advanced analysis, the minute you see an idea being formulated in the discussions of these people, the minute you start to think that maybe this will make its way to everybody else in the community. If you also compare the frequencies of topics in the communities, you can obviously see some patterns. It seems like community number 1 is quite concerned about, community 0 is quite concerned about safety. Community number 1 has an issue with the service delivery, and community number 2 has an issue with the travel time. And this merits further discussions and analysis by every transit agency. And this complicated chart takes us to the next level, which is the sentiment analysis. And I'll go slow here. On the left are the 8 categories. So we labeled every tweet to be talking about one of these categories. And then we also clustered the tweets based on their time. So we looked at morning peak, day of peak, evening peak, night of peak. We averaged then the all peak hours and also averaged in the last column all off peak hours. So you can see here there is the dimension for topics and a dimension for time. And in every cell, you see the first number is the sentiment. If it's a negative number, then this is the negative sentiment. And between the two parentheses is the standard distribution, which is an indication of do people agree or not, how they agree about the sentiment or not, how dispersed their views are. Again, we went to every tweet, we labeled the topic of the tweet, we detected the positive words and the negative words, and every word of these has a score. We crunched the scores, and we ended up saying all the tweets that are talking about spatial availability in the morning peak are negative with a score of minus 0.64. The community has a 1.29 disagreement on that. So very few of them, around maybe very limited set of them, may have a positive sentiment, but the overwhelming one is negative. And as you can expect, and as commonly known, Twitter is not a place for positive attitudes. And actually, this is a big problem for the company. They are trying to get that mentality of Twitter being a place for complaining out. But it's obvious here, all the sentiments are negative. And then we looked also at the days. Again, on the left, you see the 8 categories, and on the horizontal, you see the weekdays and weekends. And we, at the last column, we summarized, averaged the weekdays and the weekends. And again, the pattern persists. There is a common view that the comments are negative. But we looked carefully about some of these data in a more different way. This is the sentiment analysis for the disruption days in TransLink. And so they had on May 22nd, on June 9, October 24, November 24, December 30th, sort of disruption to the service. As I said, there was once a fire, another there was an earthquake, and they reduced the service or shut it down. And we again looked for every tweet, labeled them, and we labeled the sentiment. And as you can see from general view, still negative, except if you dig a little bit deeper, you find that in December 30th, there is a positive sentiment. And surprisingly, it's about travel time. So travel time in a day of disruption, positive sentiment, that is not what you are expecting. Again, in the same day of disruption, a very high positive sentiment with one of the lowest standard distributions on the matrix that you see here. So people were feeling very positive about safety and security. Again, the capacity on this day, the service delivery, and then service, safety and security, and so forth, to the extent that on the average, the day of disruption on December 30th, people were quite positive about TransLink. The conclusion that we came out of this, and of course it can be debated, is that maybe people are not happy with the service, but they do trust the organization, that they are doing utmost effort to protect them. And this is something that we are seeing to become an important part of the business model of transit agencies, while customers may not be that happy, but they trust you in your service and your performance in safety. Now, this chart should be taken with a grain of salt, because we are actually here comparing apples to oranges. And it just was done for, I guess, research interest. I don't think it should be used by agencies. But what you see here in the top chart is the scores of the customer survey, the phone customer survey, which is conducted on a daily basis and asks the customers about their satisfaction over the last or the previous 30 days. We took that survey and we also divided it into the 8 categories. And in the top chart here, you see 8 curves. And as you can see, they are all flat and similar, which I think is something that could be seen as expected. People just gives you the average of what happened. In the chart below, we looked at the 8 topics in Twitter. And you can see, as you expect, Twitter is more noisy and more susceptible to change. And so far, we could not find an objective way to compare the two. And this is why I'm saying just take this with a grain of salt. Now, with all this theoretical analysis, where does this take us as a transit agency? One of the areas was that we conducted also is how to communicate with the community. Most of transit agencies right now are going through some rehabilitation or rebuilding, and people are debating, should we build bus lines or subways or whatever? Where should we build them? Of course, this is a big discussion here in Toronto, in Calgary, and other cities. And so we zoomed in on one of the projects to see how people are viewing these projects that are being planned and implemented by the transit agency. This is, for those of you who are not familiar with Toronto, is a surface LRT line running east-west on Eglinton Street, and it's called Crosstown. We again went to Twitter, downloaded the data, and what you see here, every dot is a person, every line is a fellowship, and we also implemented the community detection algorithm, and you can see there are 4 communities there. And this busy chart shows you on the left the verbs that people have used, and on the right side with the red colors, the 4 communities. We labeled them community 0, 1, 2, and 3. And every time there is a commonality or a highlight, we put the red line. And you can see that different communities are talking about different topics. However, some topics are being discussed across all communities. We also followed the formation of this community pre-construction and during construction. And this shows you what people are talking about. So pre-construction, There was a formation of the community. There were groups dedicated to few areas. And then after construction, the discussion shifted and the groups amalgamated. And so we looked at this in September. And when the construction started in July of next year, we looked at the network. And here is the main point. And I will go a little bit slow in this chart because it's complicated, but it helps us understand a lot of the results from social media analysis. On the vertical dimension is who is for or against the project. So for is on the top and the white. The darker shade is for opponent. And so this shows you how many tweets are like supporting the project and how many are not. Also, we in the dotted lines, vertical dotted lines, you see the main milestones of the project. The idea of construction starting, the TBM being installed, actual construction starting. In between, there were revisions of the environmental assessment and so forth. We also labeled the tweets based on their topics. We selected here just 4 topics for this discussion. In green is the environmental topics. In orange, the economic. In black, anything that relates to engineering. And in blue, anything that relates to the social life. It's obvious that you can see, if you look at the green curve, there was not a big problem with that. There was not too many negative comments, few positive, but not much of an interest. If you look at the economic, you'll see before construction starts, there was not much of a consideration for it. But after construction starts, after every debate was finished, the discussion dipped into the negative side. It seems like the reality hit people and started to say, who's going to pay for that? But the obvious, clear thing that you see here is that the discussions were always typically related to engineering aspects. Where should the line be? Should it be on top of the ground or below? Should we have station here or not? How the line should be designed, and the social impacts of the line. If we move further to actual operation, we are developing a dashboard based on this system that would tell you what's going on in a disruptive day. And here we are trying to help you during the incident make an early detection of the incident and confirming it. And at the same time, communicate positively and effectively to the riders. Post-incident, we want also to look at the opinions of Twitter users. We also want to understand how their opinion changed before and after, and analyze our own, the transit agency tweets that were sent, and see which one of them helped or did not help in the management. And this hopefully will be reflected in the corporate communication, whether over Twitter or somewhere else. We're also looking at how this can be used in service planning. Obviously, a very easy thing is that we can track user experience, and with advanced analysis, you can do that route by route. You can also look at how people are rating the system in a variety of things, and then you make changes, and after the changes, you do the analysis again and see if these changes were well received or not. I'll skip this chart because it's going to take a long time. We are also looking at future aspects of Twitter and social media analytics in the smart city. Again, in Toronto, we see a shift in the mentality of transit agencies and in their decision making. Those of you who are familiar with Toronto, we have lots of streetcars, and typically because they run on the streets with other cars, they are always delayed and interrupted by traffic. About 15 years ago, the city had this problem in a street called St. Clair, and the solution to that was to have dedicated lanes for the streetcars. Surprisingly, some of the people in the community objected. They sued the city. They stopped the project. I think it was 10 months for like $8 million cost. Well, look into the future now. About a year ago, the city had the same problem in King Street. And instead of doing the same, I guess, decision as St. Clair, they went with a completely new idea. They restricted access to the street for cars during the rush hour. And also, if you need to use the street for commercial or personal usage, you are allowed to use it for 1 block, but you have to get out. And so, as you can see, the decision that was not here, the project is not a concrete project, it's not a construction project. It's a behavior change project. And the results were nice. So what we did is that we went to the Twitter account for this pilot project. We looked at the topics before, and then after the project was implemented and how the topics have changed. But more importantly, we looked at the sentiment. The project was started in November of 17, and before that, you see that there were mixed messages from the community. There were tweets in red, which is negative, and tweets in green, which is positive. After November 17, the positive is more prevalent. And also you can see the frequency of tweets. Before there was not too many. During the start, there was a lot, and then it went down again. How is this going to impact your action in your organization? Some of the work that we are looking at here is this. We look at it in 3 different ways. The first is the capturing and collection of this valuable data and using it to your decision making. So developing a dashboard to understand the topics, when do they become important, when they dissipate in that, how many people are participating, what are the subgroups, who are the community leaders. It's a big resource, and you need to have the analytics to help you with that. But the next phase of this type of research is to use machine learning to not only conduct prescriptive analysis, but also predictive analysis. What is expected from the community if this scenario happens? And finally, I guess the toughest part, which is to embed this analytics into your company processes, that is in terms of planning, communication, and incident management. I have a few caveats about the use of social media that I want to mention here. There was always a hype about social media, and I would like to be on the conservative side here, because we have seen social media analytics being abused in different ways. The first thing and the most important thing about social media analytics is that they can tell you what is going on, what's on the mind of people, but they will not explain to you why. Why are people changing their opinion? What is motivating them to participate, not participate? And so this is one big problem with social media. The second is the demographics. Social media is used mainly by certain demographics, typically the younger generation. And so you need to make sure that you balance your work on social media analytics with other means to reach to the community. Equally important, I go to social media to discuss transit because I'm using transit. If I'm not using transit, most probably I'm not going to go there and discuss extensively. And you need to capture the views of these people also. If you are in a small municipality, the data size will stop you from doing any reliable analysis. So data size is a problem. There is a potential for influential players manipulating some of the points that are made on the social media. And so we are in the era of fake news. You need to be careful about that. And also the fact that Twitter is always negative should be taken into account when you analyze Twitter. The additional thing is, if you analyze, we analyzed the King Street back in 2017. If you use that as your evidence right now, you're absolutely wrong, because the analysis is data-driven. So you have to continually download the data, and you have to continually update the analysis. It's not something that is moves on the slow pace. You have to be agile and do that. The big message is that it should not be used as a standalone analysis. You have to combine it with the surveys. You have to combine it with town halls. You have to combine it with opinion dynamics and measures. It is important to ground social media analytics. On the other side, if your organization is planning to embark on machine learning and artificial intelligence, social media analytics is one of the easiest and more appreciated things to start with. That's about what I have to say. Thank you very much, and I'll be more than happy to have any of your questions.